So Brandon, did you catch that James Marsden was at the Thunder game?
Yeah, Donut Lord, Cyclops, the dude that got dumped in the Notebook. Um, it was pretty cool to see him there. I always wondered if he was a Thunder fan, if he followed the Thunder since. I mean, he went to Pumpkin City North High School. He went to OSU. Like he is like a true Oklahoma celebrity, and he's hot right now. He's like a Hansel. He's hot right now. So it was cool to see him there.
Welcome back to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, publisher of Daily Thunder, and I'll be your host today. Alongside me is Daily Thunder beat writer Brandon Rahbar. Brandon, how are you today?
I am doing well. Just got done, with the back-to-back MVP showdowns, Thunder versus Nuggets, 2 rounds, 2 different champs. Yeah, but I'm doing well.
Well, as always, we're going to break down the last 7 days of Thunder basketball. Oklahoma City's defense bounces back from the slow start after the All-Star break. The Thunder don't need a single starter to beat the Blazers, and the much-hyped SGA versus Jokic back-to-back matchup results in a tie. But let's start with the Thunder's impressive 120-103 win over Memphis. It was on the road. It was a competitive first half. It was a tight game through really early in the third quarter, but then the Thunder turned the Jets on and they built a 17-point lead before Memphis was able to get a little closer before the Thunder punched back to run away with a 17-point win. What were your takeaways from the win in Memphis?
Yeah, it was a game that, even though it was close through the first half, I just never felt like it was a game that the Thunder were going to lose, even though, the Grizzlies are a top 5 seed in the West. And even though it was on the road, I just never really doubted that the Thunder were going to win this one. And of course, Shai goes for 41 that night. So of course, Shai pops off. J-Dub had a good all around game with 25 and 9. Aaron Wiggins continued, hitting double digits. Jalen Williams had that 4 of 4 from 3 game. He was great that night. Really, maybe that might have been what jumped out more than anything was J. Will and his shooting that night. It's funny to say a guy can go for over 40, but the guy that scores 13 is the one that popped off the most to me.
Yeah, Shea had a great night as always. He had 41 points, 8 assists on 14 to 25 shooting, and the shooting was really good for the Thunder. Like Wiggins was great from three. He was 3 of 4 to score 16 points. But we talked in the last podcast about the Thunder building up big leads, letting the opponents creep back into the game. Sometimes it results in disaster like it did against the Wolves. And it kind of happened again, but the Thunder built a nice lead in the third quarter, getting up by 17. They let Memphis back into the game, but they really quickly punched back. So against a good team like Memphis, and it was a game that, I think John Morant was really gunning for because it was a win they wanted. Pretty impressed the way the Thunder responded when Memphis cut that lead and the crowd was really into the game.
Yeah, because they did have that run, and you did wonder, like, okay, could this be like the Timberwolves again, where the Thunder have a big lead, they're on the road, it's late, and the other team makes a run, the crowd gets into it, is it going to happen again? And then I believe it was Aaron Wiggins hit a 3 and kind of calmed it, and the Thunder go on a stretch and push back and don't let it happen. So it was nice to see, the Thunder withstand a run on the road after having a big lead and kind of, it being cut in half and it getting to single digits, and ends up being a game that they run away with. So that was nice to see instead of going the other way, because we've seen it happen at least once with that Wolves game.
Yeah, and I think this game also set a standard for the defensive turnaround to respond to, again, that post All-Star break struggle. Because again, out of the break, really from 223 to March 3rd, Oklahoma City's defensive rating was 119.1, which was 24th in the league. They were scoring and they had the best offense in the league over that same period, but the defense had suffered. But this was a great game against a good Memphis team. And they had their top scorer in John Morant. And then looking ahead to the Blazers game, and again, that first game against Denver on Sunday, the defense was fantastic. So 103 points scored by the Grizzlies in Memphis. Against the Blazers, they hold the Blazers to just 89 points. And then in Sunday's big national TV game against Denver, the Thunder held the Nuggets to just 103 points. So really over that stretch of games, the defensive rating was just 96.4. And so let's talk about the defense headed into that game against the Blazers, because the news going into the game was that Shea, J-Dub, Dort, Hartenstein, Holmgren, and Wallace were all out against that game. And the Blazers was a team that had been playing decent. Maybe they were trying to make a push for the play-in. And with all those players out, kind of expected that this was a game the Thunder were like, well, we want everybody to go in healthy against the Nuggets, and if we drop this one, it's okay. Did you expect that outcome, a 107-89 win over the Blazers?
I did not. Like, this Thunder team kind of stopped surprising me because they just always exceed expectations, it seems like, and whether they're down by 15 or 20, or, you know, it's a game against the reigning champs and they're down, or whatever it is, this team has kind of stopped surprising me, except for this game, because of all those guys being out. And look, guys like Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins and Kenrich Williams and Jay Will, you know, all these guys, very good role players, and the Thunder having them is such a luxury and such, you know, I think a difference maker to have this incredible depth. But this is a Blazers team that coming into this game, you thought maybe they're going for that play-in spot, that 10 spot that nobody seems to want. It's up for grabs, and they've been playing well lately. And if you look at the roster of guys who's playing, I mean, you got Jeremy Grant, you got Tamani Kamara, who is like, you know, getting some all defensive attention for good reason. You got Donovan Clingan, a rookie that was, you know, a top 10 pick. You got Anthony Simons, who's a scorer, Shaedon Sharpe, who is, you know, a top pick, and he's flashed a lot. So, and then you got Scoot Henderson, you know, who went number 3 overall last year. So they've got players and they've been playing well, and you're just like, okay, if the Thunder can be competitive, you're like, maybe they can pull it off. You don't know. But to go out and not just win, but to dominate the way they dominated, I mean, huge credit to the backups, to the third stringers, all the guys that played that night. Incredibly impressive, I thought. I thought you could argue that this is, you know, the most impressive game of the season, given the circumstances. Aaron Wiggins was fantastic. Jang was great. Joe was good. Jay Will was obviously the headliner with his first career triple-double and also 5 stocks. He was outstanding. K-Rich was good. Caruso was great that night. I mean, just a really, really impressive team win, and a credit to, like, this is kind of a summary of what the Thunder organization have been building. Like, they develop all these guys. They know that these guys can have a bigger role at any given time, and to step up like this, I just thought was incredibly impressive.
Yeah, and it was really a complete performance offensively, defensively. Again, I was talking about the defense before. Portland was held to just 8 of 43 from three-point land, 18.6%, despite missing the stalwarts defensively like Shea, J-Dub, and Dort, along with Holmgren and Wallace. The team still forced 12 steals and 17 turnovers, kind of a different chefs in the kitchen, but sort of the same recipe on defense, with relentless defense that was forcing turnovers. And then 6 players scored in double figures. You highlighted all the different great performances led by Aaron Wiggins with 30 points, but it is worth talking a little bit more about what Jay Will did with his triple double. He had 10 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists, and he was the centerpiece of the offense. Now, looking ahead to the Nuggets game a little bit, dare I say he was almost like the Thunder's version of Jokic, running the offense through their big.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great that's a great comparison, quite honestly. And you can see how if you get a guy that's a big, and you kind of make him your hub, and he's directing traffic, and he's good at finding cutters, finding the open man, dribble handoffs, setting screens, getting guys open. Like Jay Will played that role, and he played it perfectly. I mean, he was a plus 35 in 36 minutes. He also scored really efficiently, 4 of 7 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3. But it was the playmaking, obviously, that just really, really stuck out. And like, you can kind of see like given a bigger role and to be a hub like that, like what a guy like Jay Will, and I think a guy like Isaiah Hartenstein can do. Obviously, Jokic is the best there is at this role, but it did kind of feel like a Jokic-ish role for Jay Will that night. And it was truly impressive. And this Blazers defense has been good. So a huge credit to Jay Will for that performance that night. I just thought it was cool because it was coming on the heels of a game where he went 4 of 4 from 3. So he put together 2 just outstanding performances. And then, the performance after this I thought was big as well. So really nice to see Jay Will get this run, and fun to see like Shai call him the real Jalen Williams, a callback to Summer League a couple seasons ago when J-Dub got called the real Jalen Williams.
Well, the strategy worked. Thunder rested all their starters leading into the most hyped game in quite some time for the Thunder, when the national TV noon start against Denver in Oklahoma City. You had, of course, the marquee matchup of SGA versus Jokic. And in that Sunday game, the Thunder did something similar against what they did against Memphis. It was a tie game throughout, and it was a 3-point game with 9:18 to go in the fourth quarter. And then the Thunder flipped that switch. They outscored Denver 41-20 in the fourth quarter, and they ran away with the win 127-103. So stopping right there and forgetting what happened on Monday, that was an incredibly impressive win.
Yeah, it was really, really impressive. One of the most impressive wins of the season, especially given the circumstances. National TV, and not like, fake national TV like NBA TV, and not even like cable national TV. This was ABC, like the only game on TV, noon game, the hype of SGA versus Jokic. And so there's stakes there. And to see the team go out and perform like this, given all those circumstances, it was a playoff-like atmosphere, and they rose to the occasion. And it was cool to see. Obviously, Shai was outstanding with 40 points and 8 rebounds and 5 assists. But I thought J-Dub was really, really good, and Chet dominated as well. So I thought that the big three. The 3 cornerstones of this new era of Thunder basketball were the 3 guys that kind of led the charge. Other players chipped in as well, obviously, but I thought those 3 guys in particular stood out and really made the difference in this game.
And Russell Westbrook had been playing really, really well this season. It's been a great year for him. He really struggled in this one. He was just 1 of 9 shooting, 1 of 5 from 3. He was a -17 and a plus-minus, but he did get a pretty nice ovation from the Thunder fans when at the game. Do you think, that, do you like seeing Russell Westbrook still get that warm welcome every time he comes to town?
Yeah, it's cool to see. Like, you don't see, look at like KD doesn't get that sort of welcome anywhere he goes. Paul George has talked about it on his podcast that, when he goes to Indiana, he's booed. When he goes to LA now, he's booed. Like, it's rare for players to get an ovation when they go to, a former city that they played in. But it's even more rare for it to be years and years after that player has played for the team, and this player has gotten an ovation every single time that they've come, and it's still as loud as it was. Like, I don't know if anything will ever beat that first ovation when he first came back with the Rockets, obviously. Maybe like his final season when he's doing his farewell tour, probably. But it's still incredibly loud, incredibly long. And so, yeah, I love seeing it. And Russ obviously very much appreciates it. He actually went on Instagram today to show his gratitude to Thunder fans and said that Oklahoma will always be home.
Well, Jokic has been on that pace, though, of tying what Russ had done and Oscar Robertson and averaging a triple double throughout the season. He was really close to getting another triple double in that Sunday game. He had 24 points, 13 rebounds, 9 assists, but he really struggled shooting from three. Now, throughout the broadcast, though, on ESPN and discussed on social media, I think there was an excuse given for Jokic's performance and his shooting because he fell on his elbow early in the game. Do you give any truth to that? Do you think that he was struggling a little bit because his elbow was bothering him?
I mean, I saw that. I was obviously at the game, so I didn't hear the TV broadcast, but I saw on social media how they kept talking about it on the broadcast, and I saw some of the talk on social media. My thing is, he kept playing, so he was healthy enough to keep playing, and he obviously shot really, really well the next night, like 24 hours later. So I don't know if there's anything to whether that affected his shooting or not. He obviously didn't shoot it very well. But I have no idea if it was his elbow or if it was the Thunder defense or if he just had an off night or a combination of all of the above. But I do know that Shai outperformed him in this game and that he outperformed Shai in the next game. And the Thunder win one, the Nuggets win one. So they split. And I thought if they split, then things should continue as they were, where Shai is the favorite for the MVP. And I still hold that belief.
Yeah, I think that's right. Shea did outperform Jokic in this game. He scored 40 points, 15 to 32 shooting. He did take 11 threes, but why do you think he took so many threes? Was it the scheme and the way that Denver was defending him? Was Shea trying to stuff the stat box and put up points?
I think that some of those were just good looks that just didn't land, and he's been shooting so well lately. And I think some of it was he's trying to shoot himself into it because he missed a few, and then he was just trying to hit one. And I think that some of it was the scheme. Early on, he ended up getting whatever he wanted at the rim, and he was able to attack that. Sometimes they're going to take that away and not let you go there, but Shea seems to find a crease or a crack anytime. So, he killed him in the mid range and at the rim. 2 and 11 from three. Obviously, that's a lot of threes for Shea, but funny enough, Jokic was 2 of 10 from three, so they both kind of tanked their 3-point stats that night. Shea did hit a big one though late in the game that gave him the 40.
And the Thunder got some pretty good contributions from, their number two and number three players. J-Dub had a great game, made a quiet first half, but he really exploded in the second half in the fourth quarter. Ended up with 26 points. He shot the ball well. From three, he was 2 of 4 from three and 10 of 11 from the free throw line. He also nearly got a triple double with 9 rebounds and 8 assists. And Chet Holmgren, fantastic. He had 14 points. He also had 8 rebounds and 4 blocks. And what really stood out with Holmgren's performance, and maybe surprising to me that I didn't realize he had this impact on the game. He was a plus 32 in the box score.
Yeah. No, he was, and watching the game, even though 14 and 8 don't, just jump out at you, the 4 blocks do jump out at you, but you could feel his presence. Like he was kind of taking away the paint. He deterred so many shots. I just thought his impact was great. And he made his 14 points were loud, like a spin into a dunk, like some momentum causing plays. I thought he was great. Much, much better than 14, 8, and 4 would lead you to believe. I think the plus 32 in this scenario, and a lot of times you can throw out single game plus minus, but I think his plus 32 holds up.
Well, as you noted, the second game following Sunday's showdown was another home game, back to back against the Nuggets. And this one, the Nuggets got the best of the Thunder, and they really took the Thunder to task 140 to 127. But it was a very similar game in that it was close throughout most of the game. The Thunder did build up a 12-point lead in the first half, but it was pretty close in the second half. And then in that fourth quarter, the Nuggets just ran away with the game. What do you think the difference was in this one versus the day before?
I mean, there was a few things. The biggest thing I think was J-Dub got hurt in the first half and had to leave the game. The Thunder were +8 in J-Dub's 14 minutes. And in the second half, the Nuggets just trapped and doubled Shai as soon as he crossed the midcourt line. Shai only shot 14 shots. Shai's actually was very efficient. He was 8 of 14. He was 3 of 7 from 3, 6 of 6 from the free throw line. He had 7 assists, 2 blocks, 1 steal, and 25 points. So he actually had a really nice game. He just didn't get up enough shots because the Nuggets, with J-Dub out, dared anybody else to beat them. So Shai had to get rid of the ball because they were trapping him. And the guys were making the right reads. They were making the right passes. They just didn't have shots fall, except for Lou Dort. Shout out to him, 8 of 14, career high, 8 made threes for 26 points. But other shots weren't falling in the second half, so it was some of that, taking away Shai. The biggest thing was not having a secondary scorer, somebody else that can bend the defense. I don't think the Nuggets are able to pull that off if J-Dub is in there, because he's too much of a threat and he can also run the offense. He can also attack the paint and score. So I think that was a big difference. And then the Nuggets shooting, I mean, come on. The shooting was unreal. The Nuggets shot 12 of 17 from 3 in the second half. They shot 7 of 8 from 3 in the fourth quarter, and the only miss they had was in the final minute, garbage time. Jamal Murray threw one up. That was the only one they missed in the fourth quarter. And not only was it that, but it was from guys like Peyton Watson, who went 4 of 4 from 3. Jalen Pickett went 2 of 3 from 3. And Russell Westbrook, OKC legend, obviously well stated, but not a shooter. He went 3 of 5 from 3. So everybody was hitting. And then Jamal Murray scores 34. He hit some tough shots. Look, Jokic had a great game, but I think the game was actually decided when Jokic was on the bench and that fourth quarter opened up and a 2-point game got to double digits. And that was while Jokic was on the bench. And that was 3-point shot making from the Nuggets. They just could not miss.
That's a great point. And I think maybe that's, if you're going to try to continue to argue that SGA has space between him and Jokic in the MVP race, a lot of the narrative has been, well, Jokic is clearly the most valuable player to the Nuggets. And, they're a different team when he's on the court versus when he's off, and they don't have the depth. But you're right. They ran away with this game started to run away with the game with Jokic on the bench.
Yeah. Yeah, they did. Absolutely. It's so funny to me that I guess for some reason, Jokic's teammates just get thrown under the bus to when it comes to MVP chatter, because you see all this stuff like he plays with G Leaguers, he plays with scrubs. They'd be the worst team in the West if Jokic wasn't on the team. I'm like, they got Jamal Murray, they got Michael Porter Jr., Russell Westbrook, Christian Brown, Aaron Gordon was hurt tonight, but Aaron Gordon, Peyton Watson's a solid. Like, I don't understand it. I don't understand why, we act like this team, who, by the way, they're mostly all champions and a former MVP, have been thrown under the bus like this. But I think it's a solid supporting cast. There's not another current all-star on there. Obviously, Russell Westbrook, many former all-stars, but Jamal Murray is kind of like one of those fringe all-star type players. He can be like an all-star player any given night, and obviously he was Monday night against the Thunder.
I do want to dive into the defensive struggles, though. I mean, yes, the Nuggets were hitting a lot of shots, and I think that has really inflated the score because they scored 140 points. And again, this is against the Thunder team that had been playing really well defensively over the last few games. The Nuggets shot the lights out of the ball. I mean, if you go 18 of 32 from 3, and you shoot 52 of 86 from the floor, you're not touching the rim very much. You're just hitting every shot, and it's going to be really tough to match that because Thunder didn't really shoot that poorly. They were 40% from 3. But there is a complete night and day difference between the way the defense played in Sunday's game versus Monday night's game. And, again, Chet was a plus 32 on Sunday. He was a minus 20 against the Nuggets on Monday night. How much of the defensive struggles was the Thunder being without J-Dub?
I think he's a big key. We hear the Thunder players talk about it. We've heard Shai and Mark talk about it endlessly, how J-Dub is, his imprints are all over this team's success. And I think defensively, absolutely, the fact that he truly can guard 1 through 5 and is so switchable is a big difference maker. His length bothers shot makers. His closeouts are great, and he's switchable, obviously. So I think that's a big difference. I think Chet playing for the first time on the second night of a back-to-back since his return, he didn't have the same bounce that he did. I didn't think the day before. Stamina, he's still getting his rhythm back, and he's still getting his stamina back, I think. So I think that was, a part of this all as well. Maybe, you got one the game before. Usually the team that lost comes out with more of a mission to win that next game, to prove something. And obviously former champs and pride that kicks in. So I think it's a combination of some of those. I think some of it was great shot making. I think some of it was scheme. Like, you want to let Jalen Pickett and Russell Westbrook and Peyton Watson shoot those threes because you believe that, the stats will back up that they're not going to hit those over the course of a game. So I think it's a combination of kind of all those things, and it was just kind of the perfect storm.
Well, let's talk more about the MVP debate of SGA versus Jokic. Again, you probably are going to say that it's a net neutral because Shai outplayed Jokic in game one, and the Thunder got the best of the Nuggets, and in game two, the Nuggets got the best of the Thunder, and Jokic had a better game than SGA on Monday night. So we're gonna have a little bit of a mini debate. So I'm gonna kind of run out through some of the narratives making the case for Jokic, and I want you to counteract and say why SGA should still win the MVP despite some of these arguments. So first, I'll start with the matchup, these last two games in Oklahoma City, because despite the Nuggets losing in Sunday and Jokic arguably having a little bit of an injury or at least adjusting to falling on his elbow, he still had, was very close to getting the triple double. And then the second night, he had 35 points, 18 rebounds, 8 assists. He stuffed the stat box. And then on the biggest stage with this matchup directly against SGA, there was no distance that SGA put between him and Jokic. So I would say if I'm arguing for Jokic, it's still a close race and a coin flip. You got to look more than just these last two games to decide who should win the MVP award.
Yeah, I think that these two games, I think that they were about as even as you can get. I think that the Sunday game being on national TV and having more eyes and more hype favors Shai, but then Jokic got the last word, so that favors Jokic as far as these two specific games. I think that if you actually watch the games, I just don't think – look, Jokic's stat line, his box score. This is like the difference between watching the games and looking at the box score. Because if you look at the box score, Jokic had absolutely a dominant game. 35 points, 18 rebounds, 8 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, 15 of 20 from the field, 1 of 2 from 3. Obviously, you can say nothing other than that is an outstanding game. But if you watch the game, I felt like Jamal Murray was the true difference maker and the player that won the game. Like the game was decided when Jamal Murray was on the floor and Jokic was on the bench and the other guys were also hitting all those threes. So obviously Jokic, great game. But Shai also had a good game, just not a dominant game, didn't put up big stats. So that's what I would say about those two specific games. That's how I would answer that. I still think if you call these even, Shai was in the lead coming into these two games. And at worst, it's a split. So Shai should still be the favorite coming out of these two games.
All right. Well, for the next argument, I'm going to quote Michael Malone, the Nuggets head coach, and he said, if you put player A and player B on paper and you had no idea that the guy that's averaging a triple double, the guy who's a top 3 in 3 major statistical categories, things that no one's ever done, he wins the MVP 10 out of 10. How do you respond to that?
I mean, my response to that is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has an 11-game lead over this player. And this player, what's lost in all of this, a lot of the Denver losses are due to defense, and Jokic is playing the most important position defensively, and he's not a positive defender. So yes, as Malone said, you cannot argue Jokic's stats. They are extraordinary, and he is MVP worthy. If you want to vote for Jokic and you think he's the MVP, that is a valid argument. I mean, what Malone said is true. There is nothing false about what Malone said, but there's missing context there, and that context is there is another equally worthy MVP candidate, and you're kind of shortchanging that MVP candidate's resume because that guy has an 11-game lead. He's leading the youngest team in the NBA. He's not leading former champs. His second best player was hurt the majority of the season. Other guys like Caruso and Hartenstein, big chunks of the season, so they've been injured. He's still leading them. He's having an all-time guard season. So I would say that you have a leading scorer, scores very efficiently, and then he plays two sides of the ball. I just think that argument belittles the other candidate's argument, which is just as valid.
Well, the next thing I'm going to cover is, so Jokic has won the award 3 times, but if you set that aside though, he's having his best statistical season ever, better than any of his other years where he won the MVP award. And in fact, the last time a player averaged a triple double in a season, he won an MVP award. That's Russell Westbrook. And so yes, Shai's having a great season. Shai is scoring at a better clip than Jokic, and he is arguably making a larger impact defensively than Jokic does for the Thunder. But Jokic is having an all-time historic season that is virtually unmatched in history aside from 2 other times, Oscar Robertson and Russell Westbrook, in averaging a triple-double. So if that's not, a potential tiebreaker in an MVP debate, then what is?
I mean, I would say record and defense, and I really do think that if you're looking for Shai's tiebreaker, it's the fact that he's an elite two-way player. Shai may be an all-defense team sort of guy. So you got like elite defensive play, and then you're the leading scorer in the NBA by like 4 points. Like, he is running away with the scoring title. So, the whole name of the game is scoring points and stopping the other team from scoring points. Well, Shai's scoring points better than anybody in the NBA, and he's a big key for why the Thunder have a historic defense. Like, this is not just a good defense, it's a historic defense, and Shai plays a vital part of that. He's number 2 in steals. Like it's not debatable that Shai is an elite two-way player. And obviously Jokic's triple-double, huge, but we've seen like the argument for advanced stats. Like, well, you can't just look at raw stats. You got to look at advanced stats. You got to look at, you got to dig into EPM and LeBron and WAR and all those things. And well, Shai is either leading in all those advanced stats or they're neck and neck, pretty much dead even. And that's been a big argument for Jokic over the last several years. Like last year, like Luka had the stats you could argue over Jokic, but Jokic had the record and he had the advanced stats. Well, that's what Shai has this year.
Well, it does seem to me that, Shai had kind of cemented himself as the clubhouse leader for the MVP award, but there has been a turn lately, making a stronger argument in the media for Jokic. And, a lot of the debate out there is, well, is there some voter fatigue? He's won 3 times. And, are the voters going to look to give it to somebody new? And there's been a pushback on that narrative saying, well, you have to just look at each season standing alone and ignore the fact of the prior wins that Jokic has had. And again, considering he's having one of his best seasons ever, if not his best season ever, I truly think that this is a race that's going to come down to the wire. And 2 weeks ago, to me, it seemed like SGA was probably going to win, but now I don't feel so confident. How do you feel, Brandon?
I would still favor Shai, but I do think that there has been, Jokic has some momentum. Look, it's wild to me. Like the MVP has never been the best player award. If it was the best player in the NBA award, Michael Jordan would have a dozen MVPs. LeBron would have 10 MVPs. Like it's just never been given that way. We've never just given the MVP to who we feel is the best player every year. Like you look at, things like record, like winning matters, impact to your team, like winning impact matters. And there is as big a difference between the Thunder and the Nuggets as there is from the Nuggets to the play-in. Like that is a huge difference. Like the Mavs are trying to tank, right? Like they are trying to get out of the play-in, and the Nuggets are actually closer to the Mavs right now. The Mavs without Kyrie, without AD, without Luka, they are closer to them than they are the Thunder. And the Thunder are built around Shai, and he is the engine that drives all this. Well, the Nuggets are built around Jokic, and he's what's driving them. Well, which one is being driven better? One team is being driven 11 games better. So regardless of who anyone thinks is the best player, like who is this year's MVP? Like who's got the stats, but also has the winning record and also has the narrative and also doesn't have any sort of voter fatigue? It's Shai. That would be my argument.
Very, very impassioned argument for SGA, and certainly we're all rooting for SGA to take this one. So let's look ahead at the next 7 days of Thunder basketball. They got a brutal 3-game road stretch up ahead, starting against Boston, the number 2 team in the East, a team that the Thunder won pretty handily, and again another Sunday matchup. But this one is going to be without Jalen Williams, so I imagine it's going to be a much tougher matchup without J-Dub and on the road. But with the Thunder running away with the number 1 seed in the West, and maybe there's more daylight between the Cavs and the Thunder for the top overall record in the NBA. When do you think the Thunder start thinking about resting guys to try to keep them healthy for the playoffs?
I do wonder when or if that's going to happen. Some of that, you want your guys to stay fresh and you want them to be, you don't want them to lose a rhythm, especially when you have so much momentum and they're peaking, but also obviously you want to take health and go healthy into the playoffs into account. It's interesting because the last 2 games are against the Jazz and Pelicans, and both those teams at those points will want to be giving away like games. Like they might be having guys on like 10-day contracts just to ensure losses and a chance for Cooper Flag at that point. So those decisions may be made by those other teams. Like the Thunder maybe will pick up 2 wins at the end of the season, even if they do rest their main guys, just because those other teams don't want the wins. So that could be a part of it. So before that, I think the Thunder will probably play their guys, and it's interesting. I don't know how they'll play this, but one of the big selling points and arguments, like we just talked about for the Thunder, for SGA over Jokic and MVP, and obviously I'm not saying this will or should or shouldn't or anything be a part of it, but the big gap in record, is a big argument in favor of Shai. So I personally would like to see the Thunder keep winning just to keep that gap big, especially when they might struggle with J-Dub out. If they don't have him, both for the Celtics and then the Pistons and also the Bucks, that's a 3-game road trip against 3 really tough teams that they may not have J-Dub for. So they might actually pick up a couple losses here. We'll see. Like they still very, very capable of winning each of those games with or without J-Dub, as we've seen all season. So I'm curious myself to see how all that plays out and who plays and who doesn't play down the stretch.
Well, you have been pretty hot with your predictions as of late. Again, you predicted a 4-0 week 2 weeks ago on the podcast, and last week, you called the 3-1 matchup, including how the split would be with the Nuggets taking the one on Sunday, but dropping the one on Monday. But with this gauntlet of games up ahead, starting in Boston on the road, how do you feel the record for the Thunder is going to end up facing the Celtics, followed by a pretty hot Pistons team before they close out on the road against the Bucks?
This is a tough stretch. without J-Dub. If I knew J-Dub was going to be back for the Pistons and Bucks, this would be a lot easier to predict. Let's take the mindset that he's out for this road trip just because it's a hip strain, and we saw with Caruso he missed a few games when he had his hip strain. So let's just say that J-Dub's out. I think they'll be competitive in all these games, but it's hard to say they'll win in Boston without J-Dub. So I'll say a loss there. I think that they still pick up a win against the Pistons, even though they've been very good this season, especially at home. But I said they'll pick up a win there. Second night of a back-to-back in Milwaukee. Giannis is a tough cover, especially without J-Dub. I think that's a good game. I think that can go either way. I think if J-Dub is playing, I will pick OKC to win that game. If J-Dub is not playing on the second night of a back-to-back, it's hard for me to pick the Thunder. So I'm going under the assumption no J-Dub. I hate to say this, 1-2.
Well, I certainly agree that's a possibility, especially if the Thunder are going to be without J-Dub. And I think the expectations should be tempered a little bit again because the Thunder have such a big lead for that number one seed. They're not really going to give up the top seed in the West. And aside from maybe the vanity of getting the best record that the Thunder can get and then trying to bolster SGA's MVP case, if the Thunder drop a bunch of games in this final stretch of the season, does it really matter?
No, it doesn't. They have the number one seed wrapped up. For all intents and purposes, it is wrapped up. They're going to have home court advantage throughout the Western Conference playoffs. So the most important thing, obviously, will be health going into the playoffs, making sure your guys are healthy. But I think that every single Thunder fan wants to see SGA win MVP, and for good reason. I think he's a deserving MVP winner this season. The Thunder and the Cavs are the two stories this season. As Charles Barkley said, and I agree, they are the two stories. And I think that should be rewarded with the season that he's had. So I would like to see them, continue to have that at least, 10-game gap over the number 2 seed at the end of the season for that reason, to help with the great resume that Shai has. And it's silly. It's silly, right? Like, it shouldn't matter. Like, it's obvious this far into the season. Like, they may drop some games because they don't have J-Dub, but it's very apparent that the Thunder have been the dominant regular season team this season. So it shouldn't matter if they rest guys and drop some games down the stretch. It absolutely shouldn't make a difference, no.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, host of the podcast, and he's Brandon Rahbar, Daily Thunder beat writer. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to the Daily Thunder podcast on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you like what you hear, do us a favor and leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll be back in your feed soon.